Good afternoon, UTLA family, and welcome to the 2020 UTLA Leadership Conference. Our theme this year is We Rise Together. This may be the first leadership conference for some of you, but for all of us, this is the first virtual conference we have had. Definitely not what I expected, but it is such an honor to be in this space with all of you. When distance learning started in March, we were asked to take decades of research teaching and student support practices, curriculum design, strategies for student engagement, and thousands of hours of professional development and convert it to an online platform in a matter of days. It was beyond challenging and an unreasonable ask, yet we found a way to make it happen. Thank you, educators. During an incredibly anxious time, you stepped up, working harder and exhausting every opportunity to bring some sort of normalcy to your students, and wow, did you get creative. From members like Jessica Rodarte, who is obsessed with creating her class app, opening questions for her scholars, and wants to decolonize her classroom. Members like Molly Shepard, Glenn Sachs, and Nick Harris wrote op-ed pieces and/or created change.org petitions alerting the readers that public education and educators are worth it, helping to shape the public narrative that focus needs to be on collective safety, educators, students, and families. I am inspired by all of you. See, I'm the only child born to a Black father and a Mexican mama, and I am a proud product of LAUSD. My parents instilled in me the importance of education and the importance of standing up for what you believe in. School was a place where I would learn, question, and challenge the world we live in. My family has been no stranger to the deep systemic racism that is still alive and well in Los Angeles. From the discrimination my parents had to deal with as an interracial couple during a time where it was still illegal for them to be together in many states, to the anti-Blackness that manifested itself when my father was passed over for jobs, frequently pulled over by the LAPD, questioned, and even slammed on the hood of our car while being accused of kidnapping me because we were not the same shade. As a child, seeing how your parents are treated by the world causes those interactions to stay with you and shape who you are, how you move and respond in this world, how you view safety, and how you view support. As a student of color who became a teacher of color, I have always had a guiding eye towards advocacy and racial and social justice. My mom and dad have always been right there cheering me on. Even though they weren't in a union, they had union values like honor, work ethic, loyalty, and advocating on behalf of others. When I started teaching 26 years ago, they supported me and pushed me to stand up on behalf of my students. Looking back at that support and love my parents showed me has been a model for my relationship with my own son. And now, as I watch Giovanni grow, he too believes in the power of the work we do. He attended his first official rally in March 2011 at 4 months old. He is the light of my life, and as a rising fourth grader in the district, he is invested in UTLA like his mama. He wears red every Tuesday. He inspires me and gives me the conviction and purpose to guide me in making our public education system better. UTLA turns 50 years old this year. In that time, we have only had 2 women leading this organization. In 1970, Judy Solkovitz, and in 1990, Helen Bernstein. These women are and were the pioneers who led this union. Our profession is 70% women, and it isn't lost on me that 30 years has passed since the last woman was elected to lead. In this moment of unprecedented times, and in 2020, UTLA elected its first woman of color as president. It reminds me of what Shirley Chisholm said: "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas." And if there ever was a time for implementing ideas, it is now. Triggered by the murder of George Floyd and countless other Black people, the mass uprisings against racist police violence and for Black Lives Matter in the US, around the world, is just the start of an even broader movement for social and racial justice in this age of pandemic and economic devastation. This is the greatest crisis of our lifetimes, and our world has significantly changed. While we are physically further away than ever before, I also feel we're in many ways closer than ever. Getting used to being on countless Zoom calls, coming together to support one another during this pandemic, but also for many of us, taking to the streets to demand systemic change. We cannot deny the consequences for us. Currently, there is no end in sight for this pandemic. The response to COVID-19 has impacted our economy, claimed thousands of lives, and created huge racial disparities in terms of infections and deaths. The communities we serve are some of the hardest hit, and we have been lacking the leadership from the White House on down, including our governor, to get out of this. There is no coordination of necessary resources, lack of protections for essential workers, no robust testing and tracing, no agreement on a strategy to beat this. All we get are White House officials, Betsy DeVos and others, calling for the reopening the economy unsafely, including schools. On the economic side, the economic downturn has led to Great Depression levels of unemployment, food insecurity, levels of unemployment, food insecurity, unsafe workplaces, threat of evictions and foreclosures, all with huge racial disparities. We have little help from Congress and no new money from the state. Public education is at the fore with crisis distance learning, which, as we all know, is far inferior to in-person education. But we are stuck with it for as long as the virus is a threat. With the onset of fall comes the start of school, and we are still under the threat of physically reopening unsafely during the semester. Meanwhile, public education in California is protected from cuts for this school year. But come spring, unless new funding is found, we face mass layoffs and other program cuts. Finally, the impact on students and families of not being able to return to school is immense. And as educators, we feel that weight too. Our families are juggling hunger, health, and economic devastation. When our families suffer, our students' learning and social emotional health takes a toll too. We can't count on the politicians, whether it's the White House, Congress, or the governor, to open up the economy in a safe and equitable manner. We can't count on them to fully fund public education. We can't count on them to provide a safety net for our students' families. The time when most of us sit back while a small leadership team quietly lobbies legislators is over. We must all take up this fight. We can't create a state or national movement out of thin air. Everyone has to be knowledgeable and involved. We must all rise together. We have to organize the movement from the ground up, starting with our members, starting with you. We have to take the lead, UTLA. Member involvement, though, has to be a two-way street. Members expect us, your elected leaders, to develop powerful strategies that empower you to be the best educators possible. But you know what? If those strategies are developed without rank and file feedback and course correction, many mistakes will be made that will undermine building the power we need. As a famous labor leader once said, "I don't want you to follow me or anyone else. If you're looking for a Moses to lead you out of the wilderness, you will stay right where you are. I would not lead you into this promised land if I could, because if I could lead you, someone else could lead you out." Building member power, then, is the same as building the power of the union. That is why all levels of the union, starting with the members, through your UTLA chapters, must be intimately engaged in policy development and decision-making. Your chapters need to be welcoming spaces for all educators to drive school policy on crisis distance learning, on developing anti-racist curriculum, on parent engagement, on whatever else your chapter wants and needs. They also need to be spaces for discussing tactics and strategies union-wide and proposing ideas that actually influence what is finally adopted. This is what a member-driven union looks like, which is why our first priority has to be about building power at each school site through holding regular chapter and CAT team trainings and discussions that explore how chapters can be power-building spaces that engage all members and build new leadership. Through disseminating useful information for school discussions on key topics for union action, and through establishing school and union-wide committees on those issues. There has to be an ongoing two-way dialogue, and school site priorities do not have to wait for initiatives from what some people call Big UTLA. We welcome and will support initiatives by members, chapters, clusters, and areas to form committees and organize discussions on various topics, all of which enriches UTLA culture. We have had chapters organizing co-location pushbacks. We have had chapters organizing food and supply drives for families during this pandemic. We have had feeder schools organized together to tackle declining enrollment. We have had schools take on helping families gain access and information to avoid foreclosures, and chapters demanding change against abusive bully principals who tried to silence their voice. All of which help build power, and building power is what we need in this crazy and scary times. We can do this. We have to. Based on member empowerment, I see 5 priority areas of activity for this coming year. 1, make crisis distant learning work as well as possible through site organizing. While our MOU bargaining team attempts to give educators as much control over the process as possible, no MOU can substitute for what educators can accomplish if we put our heads together within and between schools. We are the practitioners, but we shouldn't have to figure this out alone. This has to become a priority chapter organizing issue. We have to see crisis distance learning as an opportunity for chapters to build capacity and involve members by holding regular meetings, creating committees, setting up Google groups, and more to drive the school-wide program with creative ideas for making improvements over last semester. These ideas can then be taken to the entire school community and to UTLA district-wide to share with others to help problem solve any ongoing MOU issues. It will also help in developing curriculum, specifically anti-racist curriculum, so that our students are uplifted and affirmed. UTLA recently created a rank and file crisis distance learning work group to assist with this work, soliciting feedback from schools and areas and assisting in building relationships with parents whose participation is so essential for crisis distance learning to be successful. UTLA hasn't always prioritized instruction and school improvement as a central component of our organizing strategy, but it is the bedrock of what we do as educators and is needed now more than ever. 2, any and all MOU talks of in-person school reopening must be guided by science and safety. It was UTLA that came out publicly against an unsafe in-person school opening earlier this month when districts all over the state were seriously considering opening schools despite the rising pandemic. We came out not just for ourselves, but for the health and safety of our students and families, especially for more vulnerable, low-income communities and communities of color. We knew that this virus interconnects us all, that our safety couldn't be separated from the safety of our students, families, and communities. But we can't rest. The governor has slipped a poison pill into the mix by allowing districts to seek waivers for elementary children to go back to school, even though other states have been reporting surges among younger children. The governor, along with the county and state public health authorities, under pressure from business, virus deniers, and others, have modified their criteria to allow the premature reopenings that got us into this mess in the first place. We, along with parents and the community, need to make clear that school cannot reopen unless science, not politically based conditions are met. Until the virus is contained, robust testing and tracing put in place, and safe school prevention measures are properly funded and implemented. 3, we must fight for new revenue streams to public education and pass Schools and Communities First, Proposition 15 in November. It is also time to tax the rich and the corporations to fund education and other services necessary. It's likely that this downturn will be worse than the Great Recession. Its effects are longer and deeper. School funding and other services will be way down, yet billionaires and corporations continue to see record profits. Take Amazon, for example. Bezos made billions in the spring. If we don't see additional supports, then we will continue to struggle for scraps. Education will once again be pitted against healthcare and other needed services. The income inequality gap is worse than ever. We need to correct that. We must make sure Proposition 15 SCF passes. It should be a slam dunk, but the California Chamber of Commerce and Business Roundtable are spending hundreds of millions against it. Our members, parents, and communities must get behind the measure because it will finally make corporations pay their fair share in property taxes. We must also support AB 1253, which would tax the super wealthy raising an estimated $6 billion. In a time of crisis, we need those with the most to contribute more so that those with the least are not subject to material hardships. California has more billionaires than any other state because middle and low-income Californians have built an economy that allows the wealthy to enjoy fabulous prosperity. In times like these, it is only right that we ask them to give more. We have paid our fair share multiple times over, and it's their turn now. 4, we must advocate for the communities we serve. Common good demands are what we talk about when we're saying going into the hardest times any of us have ever faced. And these times are the most difficult for many of our students, parents who face unemployment, underemployment, evictions, food insecurity, institutionalized racism, inadequate health care, and more. As educators, we are up against entrenched corporate interests that absolutely do not want the government to provide the safety net that our students' families need, such as paid family and sick leave, extended unemployment and adequate unemployment benefits, adequate health and safety conditions on essential jobs, rent and mortgage forgiveness, as well as adequate funding for public education, health care, and other needed services. We can't just organize our resources for improved conditions in the schools. Conditions outside of the schools affect conditions in the same way as conditions outside hospitals affect what happens inside a hospital. Just ask any nurse or doctor treating coronavirus-stricken patients about that. So we have to be a part of grassroots coalitions that demand these things for our students' families as well as ourselves, knowing that we are really interconnected, that we all have to rise together. We can only do this successfully, create enough power, if our members understand these issues and are prepared to take action, all while engaging parents, students, and other school workers and the community. To do that, we have to start by engaging our colleagues in these discussions school by school and throughout the union. To solely and narrowly focus on school funding is a mistake. We must also actively engage around common good demands that uplift those we serve. This is what it means to be a union committed to the needs of our students as well as ourselves. And 5, we must win the school board election in November. I know time has a different meaning now as we navigate this pandemic. Mornings bleed into afternoons and weeks into months. But let us rewind to last spring's school board election victories. Our candidates, Jackie Goldberg and George McKenna, easily won re-election to their seats, and Scott Schmerelson and Patricia Castellanos placed first and fought off smear campaigns to advance to the November 3rd, 2020 runoffs. Even as we faced outside spending by the charter lobby and the billionaire privatizers, UTLA ran the most robust political ground games in our history, proving the power of people versus money. While the charter lobby put hate ads in the mail, we put people in the streets walking and talking to voters. We ran an impressive and positive campaign fueled by the passion and enthusiasm of teachers and parents who believe in public education. The charter lobby's hateful, vitriolic attack ads didn't match the impact of a teacher talking one-on-one with a voter at the door or on the phone. We won last spring because hundreds of UTLA members worked more than 1,000 neighborhoods and precinct walks alongside our parent and community allies, reaching more than 20,000 voters. On average, when we talked to a voter, 8 out of 10 times they committed to supporting our candidates. Our member texting campaign reached an additional 100,000 people who voted by absentee ballot. The same passion and enthusiasm must continue this fall as we navigate a remote political organizing drive to elect Patty Castellanos and Scott Schmerelson on November 3rd. Like so many elements of our lives, flexibility and patience is key. The stakes are high, and securing a 4-seat majority on the LAUSD school board hangs in the balance. Go to www.lateacherschoice.org to find out more and to sign up for upcoming phone bank shifts. It will not just be about taking on the school board or the superintendent, but most importantly, it's about you, the members. It's having a workplace where you are respected and valued, and there is a culture of success for all students, where school communities are strong and where we all rise together for the schools our students deserve. The path to get there will be bumpy. We are going to have to take on racial justice, understanding that our schools are not free of systemic racism, and also fully understanding that racial justice is educational justice. We are going to have to take on the historic underfunding of our schools. As many would say, our schools are broke on purpose because the priorities in this state have never been about investing in our students. When you have a prison industrial complex that the state funds per inmate at $65,000 a year, while the state funds pupils at $12,000 a year, and has yet to fully fund preventative measures like preschool for all, the priorities are upside down. When corporations continue to pass the burden off on us, working people, instead of paying their fair share, we must stand up and say no more. We must rise together. We cannot pretend that we can just close our classroom door and teach or stay apolitical. We have state legislators and national legislators making decisions that directly affect us without even bothering to ask us. Our common good demands are not contractual and don't prohibit us from a safe, equitable return. These common good demands are lifting up what parents, students, and the communities we serve have been asking for. I assert lifting those up from the most marginalized communities is powerful because it brings their voice in as well. One of the common good demands from the 2019 strike was charter accountability and transparency. Remember, we rallied in front of CCSA, thousands of us in the rain calling out the charter industry. We had amazing charter educators lobby legislators demanding accountability and transparency of an industry that has been riddled with scandal. We emailed. Some folks even rode a bus up to Sacramento to meet with legislators, scurrying around trying to lock down support. And because we took a stand for a common good demand and flexed our power as a union, working together, we won AB 1505 and 1507. This was not a bargainable item, but we won anyway. We won together because we decided not to stay silent. I look at our union and I am filled with pride. I can see the promise of where we go from here. I want folks to express themselves and to be heard, because we are going to need everyone pulling up this union. I guarantee that we won't always agree, but we will listen and be respectful in that process. In order for you to be a part of the democratic process, that means we will have to invest more time in chapter meetings, meeting as clusters, informal area meetings, and more. We must come out of this pandemic strengthened and evolved, where our union building and union meetings are free of blockades to participation of women, including childcare, meeting times, transportation, ASL, and more. We must change the culture so that anyone who wants to step up and get more involved in the union can. Post-pandemic, I see a UTLA charting a course for change. A core pillar in my life is anchored by students. I thank Kalila and Maya for introducing me so powerfully. It's humbling. I see myself in those young ladies, and I have nothing but great respect for them. I have watched them lead in Students Deserve and know they will be the best advocates for the next generation. I want to invite you to reflect in this moment. Close your eyes and think of a female student. She's very vocal, passionate, talks back, is sassy, turns in work but seems disinterested, is late to class, talks too much, hangs out with friends, challenges the things you say. She's tough. She asks why a lot. Why are we learning this or that? What's the relevance? She excelled in other classes like drama, writing, and English. And yeah, she's pretty feisty. Did you send her out of class? Suspend her? Call school police? Maybe the assistant principal or the dean of discipline? Did you give her detention for being late or talking back? Maybe you made her sit in the back of the room, clutching a marked up paper, bleeding in red ink. Or maybe you told her she couldn't have written that essay because it was just too good. Or tore up her college application because, let's face it, you're not college material. Or maybe you told her she better shape up because she wouldn't amount to anything. You see, we have all said things about students that sometimes weren't as flattering as it could have been. I am challenging you to go deeper, to make those connections with your students. Find out and take the time to build relationships with them. You never know their situation, their home life of being a latchkey kid, living in a one-bedroom apartment, that they struggled with their identity daily, what trauma they had been through, why they're scared of the police or the dean. Take the time to get to know them. Now open your eyes. See the humanity in your students. Build those relationships and know their story. When we form bonds with them, it creates empathy and advocacy. That's what our babies need. I was that student who was told those things by teachers. And if I didn't have teachers like Mr. Smiley, Mr. Galvan, Miss Banks, Miss Lyles, Miss Nobles, Miss Miller, Miss Stringles, Miss Rogers, or Mr. Retchman, I would have believed those words. As educators, we can build up our students and they will soar to heights we can only imagine. But we can also tear them down and change their trajectories as we place them within the school-to-prison pipeline. Harriet Tubman said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer." Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. And here I stand before you now as the first Black Latina president of the second largest teachers union in the nation. I am beyond grateful for the opportunity to lead with you, beside you, together, as in the words of the late John Lewis, let's get in the way and create good trouble. I would like to thank my fellow officers, Alex, Juan, Julie, Gloria, Alex, Arlene, our entire board of directors, Jeff, our executive director, our program directors, chief finance director, operations director, USW staff, OPEIU staff, Teamsters, and the executive confidential assistants, especially Evie. This is a team that is reflective, can learn from the mistakes of the past, build on the victories to come, and lead this organization with a racial and social equity lens. It is not us as individuals, but us as a collective. And we will rise together. UTLA, we will rise together. And we will create the change needed for the public education system our students deserve. Thank you.